Westminster Shorter Catechism, question and answer 9. What is the work of creation? The answer is, the work of creation is God's making all things of nothing by the word of his power in the space of 6 days, and all very good. So this is, as we said last time, the first part of the building, of the execution of God's decree, namely creation. This is the first of God's acts towards the creature. It is, in fact, to create, and to create, as it says here, out of nothing. But before we get to the out of nothing part, I'd like to talk about where it says here, God's making all things out of nothing by the word of his power. We talked already, as we talked about the doctrine of the Trinity, we talked already about the word. In John chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, we are told that the word was in the beginning with God, and that the word is God. And we know that this word is the one who in time would become incarnate as the person of Jesus Christ. It is this word who creates in the very beginning. It is this word of his power. As God speaks in Genesis chapter 1 and he says, "Let there be light," what happens? There is light. When God speaks his will, what he wills comes to fruition. It comes to pass. There is a perfect correlation between what God wills, what he speaks, and what in fact happens. What God wants and what he says shall happen is what in fact happens. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth as he speaks forth his will that which was previously non-existent would in fact come into existence. And so it's by the word of his power that he creates, notice as it says here, all things. Everything that is not God is created by God. So that, as we've indicated in previous lessons, there are in fact only two kinds of beings that we can speak about. We can speak about the divine being, the creator, and then we can talk about the creature. There is the creator and there is the creature. There is no overlap between these two. Of course, there's no confusion between them. He is the creator. There is nothing created in him. We are the creature, and there is nothing divine within us. We are always the creature, and he is always the creator. And he is the one then who creates all things. And notice what it says here, and here I want to return to this language of out of nothing. Theologians like to use the Latin expression ex nihilo. It is out of nothing that God creates. It is not as if God had pre-existing material that he uses in order to create. It is not as if he is an artist that uses pre-existing materials like paint or a canvas or perhaps clay to make a structure. He doesn't use pre-existing materials that exist alongside of him and with him, but he creates all things out of nothing. There was nothing other than God, and then God willed, and he spoke to create, and that which previously did not exist came into existence. It is ex nihilo, out of nothing. And then it goes on and it explains that this takes place in the space of 6 days. Here, the Westminster Shorter Catechism is reflecting the teaching of Genesis chapter 1. And in Genesis chapter 1, it is very clear how God creates. He creates his heavenly dwelling place at the absolute beginning. And then he begins to speak and to bring into existence one thing after another in the visible heavens and earth. And he speaks. And he speaks in such a way that it is with power, so that when there was previously no light, suddenly, at the word of his power, there is light. And he speaks, and the waters are divided, and he speaks, and man is made and created. And then after the 6 days of creation, He rests on the seventh day as he re-enters into his everlasting heavenly temple to be enthroned as the Lord, as the sovereign over all of the creation that he has made. And most significant is what we are told at the end of the sixth day as God looks and he beholds all of his creation. And what does he say? He makes a pronouncement, a declaration, an evaluation of the work of his hands. And he calls it all very good. As it says here in the Westminster Shorter Catechism, he created in a space of 6 days and all very good. In other words, there were no imperfections in the creation that he made. There was no sin or sinfulness in the creation that he made. But he made it all very good. He made it upright. He made it holy. And he made it in such a way that there were no defects in it at all. There were no shortcomings in the creation of which he made. He created and made all of creation exactly the way in which he intended it and wanted it to be made, so that deficiencies that we might see within creation around us, maybe we see natural disasters, or we see diseases, or maybe there are animals or insects that we don't like, that can hurt us and that afflict us with diseases or hardships or suffering of some sort. This was not always the case. God created things all very good. And so we understand then that the defects that we might see in the creation around us today are defects that have come because of the fall, because of sin. Sin has made that which was at one time very good to no longer be very good, but to in fact become deficient and cursed and corrupt. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment.